Most people who feel drained around people aren't antisocial, broken, or secretly cold. They're paying a cost they don't know how to name, a sensory tax. And the reason it feels so confusing is that the bill doesn't arrive at the moment you're spending. It shows up later as heaviness, irritability, fog, and the strange urge to disappear. Here's the open loop to hold on to. The thing exhausting you might not be the conversation at all. It might be everything surrounding the conversation, the lighting, the sound layers, the posture you hold, the micro decisions, the self-monitoring, the background vigilance. By the end, you'll be able to spot your personal highest tax stimuli, and you'll have a simple protocol that lets you be around people without needing a full day to recover. When people talk about social energy, they usually describe it like a personality trait. Introverts recharge alone, extroverts recharge with others. Clean story, convenient story. But in real life, plenty of social people crash after a dinner. Plenty of quiet people feel fine after a deep one-on-one. That mismatch is your clue. This is less about who you are and more about what your nervous system is processing. In psychology, a useful way to think about this is demands versus resources. Every environment places demands on attention, on sensory processing, on emotional regulation, on decision-making, and you have resources: sleep, baseline stress levels, hydration, time pressure, physical comfort, familiarity, a sense of control. When demands exceed resources for too long, you don't just feel tired, you feel wrung out. That's not weakness, that's math. A 29-year-old female project manager described it like this: "I can lead meetings all day, but put me in a loud restaurant with my team and I'm wiped. I thought it meant I hated socializing." What was actually happening was a perfect storm of subtle taxes. The restaurant forced her brain to separate voices from noise, track multiple conversations, read facial expressions in uneven lighting, manage timing, monitor how loud she was speaking, and stay politely engaged while her body sat in a rigid chair for 2 hours. The meeting room, by contrast, had predictable rules, a clear role, and fewer sensory variables. Same person, different tax rate. Your brain is constantly filtering. It has to decide what matters and what can be ignored. When that filter gets overwhelmed, or when it has to work too hard, you experience something that feels like emotional exhaustion, but is often cognitive and sensory overload wearing an emotional costume. You don't think, "The fluorescent light is draining me." You think, "I'm not myself today." You don't think, "My auditory system is working overtime." You think, "People are too much." And because you can't point to a single dramatic cause, you end up blaming your character. You tell yourself you're fragile. You tell yourself you're moody. You tell yourself you should be able to handle it. That self-criticism becomes an extra tax on top of the original tax. Now you're paying interest. Let's make this concrete with a quick self-check. No journaling required. Just answer silently as you listen. After being with people, do you feel a clean physical tiredness or a buzzy, irritated tiredness? Do you crave silence specifically, or do you crave being alone specifically? And does the drain happen with everyone or in certain settings? Restaurants, open offices, family gatherings, group chats? If your answers cluster around buzzy, silence, and certain settings, you're not running out of social battery. You're running out of processing bandwidth. Bandwidth is the hidden currency here. The sensory tax is what drains it. Now, one counterintuitive point that changes everything. Sometimes the most draining interactions are the ones you're doing well. The ones where you're polite, attentive, helpful, quick to respond. Because performance requires monitoring. Monitoring requires attention. Attention is expensive. Think of it as running extra tabs in your mind. One tab is the conversation. Another tab is, am I listening well? Another is my face doing the right expression? Another is, did that land wrong? Another is, what should I say next? Another is, don't be awkward. Even if you're calm on the outside, inside you're running a small control room. That control room costs energy. This is why people can feel oddly depleted after being around people they like. It's not dislike, it's load. Sensory tax usually comes from 5 categories, and you don't need to memorize them. Just notice which ones hit you. First, noise layering, not loudness, layering. A single loud sound can be annoying, but multiple competing sounds, music, clinking, overlapping voices, traffic, forces your brain to constantly separate signal from noise. That's called effortful listening, and research suggests it increases cognitive load. The more effort your brain spends decoding, the less it has for enjoying. Second, visual chaos. Busy environments are not neutral. Bright lights, movement in peripheral vision, screens, crowded spaces, your attention is pulled even if you don't choose to look. The body reads unpredictability as a reason to stay alert. Alertness feels like tension. Tension feels like social fatigue. Third, posture and physical discomfort. Sitting in a tight chair, standing without moving, wearing uncomfortable clothing, being too hot, too cold, too hungry, these are basic, but they matter. Your nervous system doesn't separate social from physical. It just registers load. Fourth, role ambiguity. Clear roles reduce mental work. If you know why you're there, host, teammate, listener, friend, your brain can relax into a script. If the role is unclear, are we networking? Are we bonding? Are we evaluating each other? Your brain stays vigilant. Vigilance is exhausting. Fifth, emotional mirroring and care labor. Some people naturally track others' moods. They adjust, they smooth, they anticipate. That can be a beautiful skill, but it's also labor. If you're constantly scanning for how everyone feels and trying to keep the temperature comfortable, you're not just participating, you're regulating the room. Here's the part that often stings. You can be drained around people because you're good with people. The skill is real, the tax is real. Now let's talk about why this tax has gotten worse for so many people lately, even those who used to feel fine. Baseline stress is higher, sleep is lighter, attention is fractured. People are carrying more background urgency. When your baseline is already elevated, it takes less to push you into overload. The same dinner you handled 2 years ago now costs more. Not because you're declining, because your resources are lower. In nervous system terms, your system has a window where social stimulus feels manageable, even enjoyable. Outside that window, the same stimulus feels like threat, too much information, too little control. The goal isn't to force yourself to tolerate overload. The goal is to widen the window by lowering unnecessary load and increasing recovery. And here's a subtle but important distinction. Recovery is not the same as avoidance. Avoidance is when you shrink your life to keep your nervous system from ever being activated. It feels safe short term, but it can make your world smaller and your confidence thinner. Recovery is when you engage, then restore. Engage, then restore. That's training. That builds capacity. So if you've been telling yourself, I just need to be tougher, drop that line. Toughness is not the best strategy for a sensory tax. Design is. Most people do the opposite. They try to solve sensory drain with social skills. They over-prepare topics. They practice being more outgoing. They force more exposure. And then they're confused when they still crash. Because the main leak wasn't what they said. It was what their system processed. Let's shift into solutions, but not the fluffy kind. Practical, mechanism-based, and adjustable. First, the minimum viable version. This is the 2 5-minutes protocol for when you can't change the environment and you're already feeling taxed. Before you go in, do a 20-second body reset. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, let your tongue rest. Exhale longer than you inhale twice. That long exhale signals, we're not sprinting. Then choose one sensory anchor. Something simple. Feel your feet inside your shoes, or feel the texture of your cup. Or notice one stable sound under the noise, like the hum of an air conditioner. You're giving your attention a single rail to run on, so it doesn't scatter. Finally, use a micro-boundary sentence. One sentence that reduces monitoring. Something like, I'm a little low energy today, but I'm really glad to be here. Or, My brain's a bit full, so I'm listening more than talking. That sentence is not an apology. It's a permission slip. It lowers the performance tax because now you don't have to act fine. That's it. 2 to 5 minutes of design inside chaos, body reset, sensory anchor, micro boundary. Now the standard version. This is what you do when you have some choice and you want to stop paying unnecessary interest. Start with environment selection, not personality negotiation. Instead of deciding, do I have energy for people? Decide, do I have resources for this setting? Choose lower tax settings when possible. Daylight, quieter venues, smaller groups, walking instead of sitting, one-on-one instead of five-way crosstalk. You're not being difficult, you're being strategic. Then set time boundaries like a professional. Many people wait until they're depleted to leave, which means they leave at their worst. Your nervous system learns social equals collapse. Instead, leave while you still feel okay. It sounds almost too simple, but it changes the association. You're teaching your body, we can do this and still be safe afterward. Use a pre-decided end time, even if it's flexible. I can stay for an hour is a completely valid plan. When your brain knows there is an exit, it stops scanning so hard for danger. Certainty reduces vigilance. Next, reduce the sensory load you can control. Wear comfortable clothes. Eat something beforehand so hunger doesn't amplify irritability. If noise is your trigger, pick seats strategically. Back to a wall, away from speakers, away from the kitchen. If visual chaos is your trigger, face a simpler view. These aren't quirks, they're levers. Then shift your conversation strategy from perform to pace. You don't need to be constantly responsive. You can pause. You can take sips. You can let silence exist. When you speak slower than your anxiety wants to, you reduce your own internal noise. People often find that calming, not awkward. And here's a powerful reframe. Your goal is not to be impressive. Your goal is to be present. Presence costs less energy than performance. Now the upgrade version, for high performers who want to be social without crashing and who are willing to treat this like training. Upgrade starts with tracking patterns like an athlete, not obsessively, just accurately. Notice your top 3 tax multipliers. For many people, it's some combination of loud environments, unclear expectations, and people-pleasing monitoring. For you, it might be different. The point is, you can't optimize what you can't see. Then create a recovery budget the way you create a time budget. If you have a high-tax event, build in a recovery block afterward that actually restores you. Not scrolling, not doom looping, not rehashing conversations. Restoration is usually quiet, movement, hydration, low light, simple tasks, or nature. A short walk with no audio can be more restorative than an hour on your phone because it reduces input instead of increasing it. Also, train your nervous system with gradual exposure to sensory complexity, not just more social. For example, practice being in a cafe for 15 minutes with a book, then leave. Practice a small group, then recover. Practice a louder setting, but with control, earplugs, strategic seating, shorter time. You're teaching your system that stimulation can rise and fall without catastrophe. That widens the window. There's another upgrade move that feels almost unfair. Reduce your self-monitoring with a shift in focus. Instead of tracking how you're coming across, track what you're learning about the person. Curiosity is a low-tax form of attention. Self-surveillance is high-tax. When you move from "how am I doing" to "what's true about them," your mind relaxes. You become more yourself with less effort. Now, a second pattern interruption, because this part matters. The thing you call social drain might actually be decision fatigue wearing a social mask. A 22-year-old male engineering student said he felt exhausted after hanging out, even if it was fun. When he looked closer, the hangouts were always unstructured. Where should we go? What should we eat? Who's coming? Are we staying out? Should we invite more people? It was constant micro decisions. He didn't need fewer friends. He needed fewer open loops. The fix wasn't becoming more confident. The fix was structure. One location, one plan, one end time. Immediately, socializing cost less. Structure is calming because it reduces prediction work, and prediction work is one of the brain's most energy-intensive jobs. If you want a simple phrase to carry with you, make it this: unpredictability is expensive. That's why some people feel less drained at a work event than a casual gathering. Work events have scripts. Casual gatherings can be socially ambiguous. Your brain works harder. Let's address the elephant in the room: masking. Masking doesn't mean you're fake. It means you're adapting. It's the way you smooth your reactions, manage your tone, stay agreeable, laugh at the right moments, hide boredom, hide irritation, hide fatigue. Everyone masks a little. The problem is when you mask constantly, especially when you don't feel safe being low energy or quiet. Masking is not just social, it's physiological. You're holding facial muscles, you're holding tension, you're holding attention. That's why you can come home and feel like your body was braced for hours. You don't need to stop masking entirely. You just need to mask less, earlier. Earlier is key. When you wait until you're depleted to communicate your state, you're already running on fumes, and everything feels heavier. But if you signal gently at the beginning, "I'm happy to be here, I'm just a bit quiet today," your system relaxes because it no longer has to prove something. It can be that simple. Another misunderstanding that keeps people stuck is thinking recovery has to be long to work. You don't always need a full day alone. Often you need a proper downshift. Downshift means reduce sensory input, reduce social demands, reduce decision making, and let your body come out of alert mode. 10 minutes of low light and slow breathing can do more than 2 hours of half rest while you're still consuming content. If you want a practical downshift routine, here's one you can use anywhere. When you get home, or even when you sit in your car, don't immediately flood your brain with phone noise. Sit still, drink water, let your eyes soften, let your breathing lengthen. Give yourself a 5-minute sensory fast. You're telling your nervous system the stimulus has ended. Without that signal, your body can stay revved even in a quiet room. Now, let's talk about boundaries without making it dramatic. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. A filter is what reduces tax. A filter can be choosing the right setting. A filter can be choosing smaller groups. A filter can be leaving earlier. A filter can be saying no when your resources are low. A filter can be deciding you're not the emotional thermostat for the whole room. That last one is huge. If you're the person who always notices tension and tries to fix it, your social drain makes sense. You're doing invisible work. You're scanning for safety cues. You're managing other people's comfort. That's a lot of processing. Try this. The next time you feel responsible for the room, silently repeat: I can be kind without managing. You can be warm without carrying. You can listen without absorbing. That shift alone can lower your tax. One more counterintuitive truth. Sometimes you're drained because you're understimulated socially, not overstimulated. Yes, really. If you're in conversations that stay shallow, your brain works hard to stay engaged without reward. It's like chewing without nutrition. You smile, you nod, you fill space, but nothing lands. That can feel exhausting too. In that case, the solution isn't less people, it's better connection. One meaningful conversation can cost less than 3 superficial ones because it gives your brain coherence. Coherence is soothing. So the question isn't, do I hate socializing? The question is, what type of socializing costs me the most and what type restores me? That's a different life. Here's a final integration to tie it together. If you feel drained around people, assume first that your nervous system is overloaded, not that your personality is flawed. Look for the sensory tax, noise layers, visual chaos, physical discomfort, role ambiguity, and emotional labor. Reduce what you can. Add structure. Communicate early. Recover intentionally. And train capacity gradually, like you would train strength, stress, rest, adaptation. You don't need to become a different person to feel better around people. You need a better system for the person you already are. If anxiety is overwhelming, consider professional support. And if you want, leave a comment with the setting that drains you most. Loud restaurants, group hangouts, family gatherings, open offices. Just naming your highest tax environment is often the first step toward changing it. The old advice was built for a world where you picked one lane, stayed in it, and slowly became the person who does that. But the future doesn't reward single lane certainty the way it used to. It rewards people who can move across domains without losing credibility, people who can learn fast, translate between groups, and build things that don't fit inside one job title.